Not knowing what to do anymore, I sat at the banks of this hellish lake for the longest time, unable to hinder its deadly fumes from entering my worn-down body. As I listened to its waters seething with a most unnatural rot, I contemplated my fate. My mistress had now left me twice. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Maybe that family of champions waiting for me in Volcano Manor would be able to soothe the pain. But I wasn't there just yet, and needing to preoccupy myself with anything else than the torment of my current predicament, I decided to look into the vast and terrifying mystery that lay in front of me. At first, I felt like a maiden desperately trying to protect the sanctity of my body, while persistently being drawn to an abyss of depravity. Before long, however, I realized that the concept of purity was but an illusion, and I willingly entered the filthy waters without getting soiled. Lo and behold, I was accordingly rewarded with access to outlandish and hitherto hidden contraptions, enabling me to slowly make it across this lake of rot. I'd rather not talk about that part of my journey. The mere memory makes me sick to this day, and even though I found rare valuables, quite a few actually, I wouldn't want to go back to that repulsive place. Truly, those hours felt like years. But eventually, I made it across to the other side, only to find myself in a long-forgotten cloister. Approaching a roaring waterfall filled with the vile substance of the lake, I discovered stairs leading downward and saw the final seconds of a lost soul who had been unable to cope with this hellish existence. Again? Now that was just sad. From the stone platform I had arrived at, I now bore witness to an uncanny sight. Below me, large insects, like the ones I had encountered near the church of the rot-infected maiden, seemed to be praying to a most likely unfathomable deity. I decided not to disturb these clearly pious creatures. It would have been selfish of me to interrupt their devout traditions, whatever this disgusting thing was. But I did not expect to find a heavy stone coffin at the far end. Now, I saw myself as if outside my own body. Like in a vivid dream, I observed how I entered that stone coffin, where I, much to my dismay, even closed the heavy lid. But it got worse. The dream became an outright nightmare as the coffin gently took off into the roaring and rot-inflected waters. For some reason, this wasn't the end, and still staring at myself in disbelief, I watched as I climbed out of that horrendous vehicle. I now found myself even further underground, in a place lit by curiously glowing plants growing on its walls. Standing in front of that shimmering yellow barrier I had come to expect, I entered despite how my flesh oozed with pain. Arriving at an enormous star-filled cave, I was disposed of by a strangely colored and large creature hovering at the far end. What had even happened? It turned out that the answer to that question was a monstrosity of appalling proportions, and for an ungodly number of hours it continued to harass and kill me. Repeatedly. And then it dawned on me. What I needed was not more training, nor a different approach. No, what was required in this situation was for me to step up my game. Since I'd come into this world, devoid of death and perpetually tormented by pain and suffering, I had never considered my appearance. But if I were to become Elden Lord someday, I couldn't reign in ragged attire. I also decided to spend those runes acquired throughout my journey, bought smithing stones by the numbers, and visited the smithing master, who gladly took care of that vulgar brick hammer still in my possession. That fiend was going to get what was coming to it, and I was going to be glorious while bashing its alien head into oblivion. Entering this vast underground arena one final time, I hardly bothered dodging the attack that always came, and on a whim decided to improve the already magnificent weapons I had equipped. Even without being familiar with the power of that warish ability, I proceeded gleefully, because I knew that the beast plagued by those many-colored and pus-filled blisters would die soon. Regrettably, my knowledge didn't hinder awkward moments, with me hitting nothing but air. But when those great hammers in unison came down on this absurd and enormous skull floating in the air, it was unlike anything else, and there was nothing in the world but the brutal climax. Obviously getting desperate, the nightmarish creature now tried to crush me with huge rocks, most likely summoned from some hellhole in another world. But to no avail. I didn't even consider its peculiar attempts at hurting me to be anything other than a waste of my time. Because it was happening, and the creature was now helpless in its struggle. The demise of this unnatural fiend was approaching, and as I tore into it with full force, it broke down once more, allowing me to take pleasure in driving this obscenity closer to its end. As a final act of cowardice, it went away for the briefest moment, only to suddenly reappear deviously trying to get the better of me. But I knew the foul tricks it deployed, and gracefully gave it its death blow. If there had been witnesses to this supreme victory, they would without a doubt have loved me, and perhaps even despaired. I enjoyed that thought quite a bit, letting the unsavory sensations of satisfaction writhe in my trembling body. Eventually, I woke up from that haze of uncharacteristic cynicism and approached a quaint, glowing barrier, which apparently hadn't been opened by my knightly prowess. Realizing that I was trapped down here, and that only the roots near the flickering sight of grace could return me to the lands between, I touched them. Once again, I found myself back at the Round Table hold. Here I nobly tolerated the toothless and husky nanny indecently engaged with those hairy fingers, and acquired secret knowledge from her. Finally, after what felt like a lifetime, I was once again back at that grand lift. It didn't seem any different from the last time I'd seen it. Unsure of what exactly to do, I approached the stern-looking statues and nervously lifted both parts of the medallion high into the air. At first, nothing. Then the enigma in my hands began to glow, awaking the guards of stone who in turn faced me. Ancient machinery hidden from sight and unused for eons rumbled deep within the earth. I could hardly believe the magnitude of it all. As darkness engulfed me, the contraption from a past long gone began moving my body through a hollow and vast corridor, seeming to stretch upward for an eternity. When I regained my sight, I was struck by an overwhelming sense of unfamiliarity. Feeling fresh air against my face, I gasped and took deep and rejuvenating breaths. Had I gone to another world? Nay, the capital was close, and my journey would soon come to an end. While the magnificent Erdtree loomed miles away, protected by the enormous walls of the majestic city, the throne was within reach. I could feel it. He had been right, that molester of men back in Castle Stormvale. Within me burned the flame of ambition to set this deformed world straight.